So Florida's permitless carry bill is making its way through the state legislature. You'd think it would be pretty simple, but unfortunately, it's kind of a 103-page pile of garbage. Let's dig in and check out the good, the bad, and the stupid in this bill. First of all, let's just address the issue of the term constitutional carry. I kind of hate that term as it's being used today, as if a state were actually going for constitutional carry. They just delete every reference to firearm carry in the law, because naturally, carrying a firearm is presumed constitutionally protected. But pretty much none of them do that. Florida's bill, HB 543, which is the subject of today's video, originally was titled Permitless Carry, but is now called, quite charmingly, Public Safety. Lovely. Florida's HB 543 does some not bad things, some bad things, and some straight stupid things. The digest of the bill that's, supposed to be the brief explainer of what it does is 5 pages on its own. So let's talk about the good/not bad. It removes the requirement that some people have a carry permit in order to be able to carry a firearm concealed. And it also removes the requirement that carry permit holders carry both a permit and another valid ID, again, if you're a permit holder. It also repealed a law relating to possession of firearms or destructive devices when you're in a pharmacy. So let's start talking about the bad here. It spends millions upon millions of dollars forcing weird paperwork around in the auspice of preventing rare tragedies. It likely results in weird stuff happening to kids who get picked on in schools. It sets up gun-sniffing dogs, and it expands the definition of prohibited acts relating to possession of firearms in the state. So let's dig in. The thrust of the bill that you're probably concerned about is the actual permitless carry bit. But that's only a few pages here. How this is accomplished is by amending the law to state that you are authorized to carry a concealed weapon or firearm if you have a carry license or if you otherwise satisfy most of the criteria to get a carry permit, which include being a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, alien, or some kind of weird diplomat, being 21 years of age or older unless you are a current or former government slave, not being physically unable to safely handle a weapon or firearm, such as by having some sort of physical impairment, which has its own problems, not being a convicted felon, not having been found guilty of a crime related to controlled substances within the last 3 years, because that totally has everything to do with your ability to safely use a firearm, not having been committed for the abuse of controlled substances unless you've had your rights restored administratively thereafter, that you're not an alcoholic who drinks too much, like if you've had 2 DUIs within the last 3 years, or if you've been convicted of using a firearm while intoxicated within 3 years, or you're a habitual public drunken disturber. If you're not legally incapacitated, you've not been committed to a loony bin, you've not had a withhold of adjudication for any misdemeanor crime of domestic violence within 3 years, which is kind of messed up given a withhold of education. It's, kind of necessarily not an adjudication. That you're not subject to a restraining order and you are not prohibited from purchasing or possessing a firearm by any other provisions of Florida or federal law. The only requirements that they've left out for people carrying without a permit is that you desire a legal means to carry a concealed weapon or firearm for lawful self-defense, but don't worry, that's still in the permit part, and that you complete an NRA or COP-sanctioned firearm misinformation course. If you're carrying without a license, it also requires that you carry a valid ID if you are carrying that firearm. Not carrying your ID while carrying the firearm is a $25 non-criminal fine, which is kind of funny. It also specifically applies the long list of places where permit holders are not allowed to carry a firearm into to permitless carriers. It eliminates the need to carry both normal ID and concealed firearm permit, which is totally a state-issued ID anyway, if you have the state carry permit. Of course, there's piles of conforming amendments where basically everywhere that compliance with the concealed carry laws were cited has been updated to the new code numbers, including like whatever investigators the public defender's office want to use being allowed to carry a gun. So now, before we get into the even worse and uglier parts of this bill, Lots of you ask me regularly if there are any national gun rights groups that I recommend supporting, and Second Amendment Foundation is the only one I can presently recommend at all. For nearly 50 years, the Second Amendment Foundation has been fighting for your Second Amendment rights. Having been involved in over 250 cases and with an active litigation load of over 40 lawsuits, SAF has the expertise and experience necessary to fight government overreach and challenge unconstitutional laws. SAF, winning firearms freedoms one lawsuit at a time. To learn more or to donate, check the link in the description. Now back to this bill. There's piles of stuff about helping schools get school resource officers, to make sure that minor juvenile indiscretions turn into a lifelong criminal prohibition, including a whole page about how private schools who want to go through the school guardian program, but whose sheriff have not implemented it, and the school guardian program, that's the 144-hour course you have to take in order to be able to just concealed carry if you're a teacher or whatever. Well, they can now request that the sheriff implement such a program, and if the sheriff refuses, they can pay another sheriff's department to train their teachers or whatever. And again, this stupid program, by the way, requires 144 hours of training, which includes 12 hours of diversity training and 132 hours of firearm training, which is separated into many subcomponents. And of course, again, this Guardian program thing was supposed to be the carrot for gun owners in that Parkland era law in Florida. Yeah, we totally benefited from that. Bizarrely, this bill also appears to slightly expand the state's definition of machine gun, for which there is an independent Florida prohibition. To my gut, this seems like they're trying to capture stuff like Glock switches. This sucks, as Florida law specifically prohibits you from concealed carrying a machine gun, which sucks. Man, I hate unconstitutional laws. Sucks. Furthermore, instead of simplifying the law as to what a weapon is, because Florida specifically regulates both the carrying of a concealed weapon and a firearm, they just heavily restructure that bloated definition. Interestingly also, they removed a section from the state supremacy law where the legislature had previously said that it was preempting local firearms ordinances to prevent people from being arbitrarily denied of their rights. They kind of just, yeeted that bit. There's also still the stupid waiting period unless you have the stupid permits. It kind of becomes one of the only reasons to get a permit is to not have to arbitrarily wait 5 days or whatever it is, 5 business days to get another gun. Again, no matter how many guns you already have, you've got to wait all this time. There's also so much water carrying for federal law in here, it's almost absurd. Half the stuff in here is predicated on it also being federally legal to not be Florida illegal. Why even have a state government? What are you even doing with the money you steal from us, Florida? Now, carrying in cars has been a point of confusion for Floridians for years. There's this stupid myth about needing to have your gun 3 steps away. And this bill presented an opportunity for the legislature to clarify that and get rid of this stupid myth. And it didn't. They add a specific section saying that adults aged 18 or older are allowed to have a handgun or weapon in a private conveyance or vehicle, provided it is securely encased or otherwise not readily accessible. But you are not allowed to carry the handgun on your person inside of the private conveyance or vehicle. But you are allowed to carry a firearm other than a handgun anywhere in the private conveyance if it is carried for a lawful use. This did nothing to address the confusion in Florida and the stupid 3-step myth. It just shifted the Lakers around and arguably made the whole thing worse. Also, why? Why? Just get rid of it. Your vehicle is effectively an extension of your domicile. Almost every other area of the law treats it as such. In Florida, one of the early adopters of the castle doctrine, just accepting your car? You just want the cops to just be able to do whatever? You know how many stories I've heard from officers that'll Terry stop somebody and then just root around for a handgun, because guess what? Especially in unsafe neighborhoods, people will rationally choose to use some kind of means or mechanism to secure their bodily autonomy. Shocking, I know. And then what do they get them for? Violation of the carry law, because the handgun is in the cup holder or otherwise immediately accessible and loaded. Great job. Protect and serve. Next, the bill sets up an active assailant response policy around page 49. This is related to that Parkland era law that we had. There's this fixation with mass casualty events. Of course, they're horrible and they're terrifying. Praise God, also, they are unbelievably rare, and schools are one of the places they happen least. And yet still, let's talk about the rest of this bill. So, the legislature finds that every law enforcement agency in this state necessarily and must be prepared to respond to an active assailant event by creating a response policy by October of 2023. The State Department of Law Enforcement will tell on every law enforcement agent that has not complied with writing a book report on active assailant situations by January 1st, 2024. So it's the point of the other deadline. This relates to the paper pushing that was supposed to be the compromise in Florida's Parkland bill, which literally helped nobody and was the first new law to screw over Floridian gun owners in 40 years. Not to say that we weren't already being screwed over before that. Furthermore, halfway through, the bill requires the Office of Safe Schools under the Commissioner of Education to develop a statewide behavioral threat management operational process, a Florida-specific behavioral threat assessment instrument, and a threat management portal to make sure that every kid with a bowl cut spends as much time in weird mazings as possible so that they can be properly tortured into extremists. This behavioral threat management process will apparently guide schools to identify, assess, manage, and monitor potential and real threats to schools. I like how they separate out potential with real. This will set up threat management teams defining behavioral risks and threats and the use of that behavioral threat assessment instrument to evaluate the behavior of a particular student who they deem may pose a threat. So, bowl cut, trench coat, gamer, that sort of thing. I'm sorry, if it seems like I'm being crass, it's just this fixation is absurd. This is not an intelligent use of state resources. It is not calculated to make an appreciable change. Be involved in your communities, police. Be there in schools. If you're going to have a school resource officer, encourage them to actually get to know the students, figure out what's going on, and if there is a weirdo, which happens occasionally, keep an eye on them. You don't need a uniform management protocol to force these kids into bizarro boxes. I don't see that as making a difference. I just don't. But I do see it costing $60 million. Upon its availability, all schools must use this process. It will include a threat management portal where these schools must report and upload documents documenting these students. This is all in the form of amendments, again, to the old Parkland Law's threat assessment teams. They are now threat management teams. So they got some teeth now, apparently. So basically, when a potential threat is identified, the threat management team must report it to the school superintendent, and then the school superintendent must attempt to notify that student's parents or guardians. I don't really see a problem with that. But if this special task force suspects an immediate mental health or substance abuse crisis, the school personnel must follow a certain checklist, which includes intervention or referring to appropriate services. Now, this type of language is just, it doesn't inspire the warm and fuzzies, right? When people need help, who are you going to send, right? Someone who is trained with dealing with these individuals, like a therapist or a guy with a gun. And the level of law enforcement involvement that they have in this is quite concerning. It seems that they are very quick to send a guy with a gun to go deal with somebody who's having an emotional problem. And of course, this does nothing to cure the huge issue we have where mental health problems are intensely stigmatized. So now what are you going to do? Pick the kid up out of class, drag him into the principal's office? That certainly won't have the kids talking about him and making the problem worse. Of course not. You're so brilliant, state. Around page 70, this law sets up the Florida Safe Schools Canine program, which literally calls for school gun-sniffing dogs, which are about as effective as you would imagine. All right, Rose, wake up, test time. So tell me, is this a gun? Now, actually, legally it is, so you might want to brush up on that. All right, next item. The law states that these firearm detection canines act as liaisons between students and law enforcement agencies and serve as ambassadors for law enforcement agencies to improve community engagement. It even sets up a little thing where if you give money to your cops to buy the stupid gun dog, you might get to call yourself a Florida Safe Schools canine partner. This whole bill is a wonderful spilling of ink and burning of dollars in the ever-evolving politics of doing nothing. The fact that Florida's allegedly pro-gun legislature takes such intense pains to tie the tiniest morsel of respect for gun rights with spending millions on security theater is asinine. It stands for the proposition that gun rights and respecting them are necessarily connected with active assailant situations, which is so knuckle-draggingly, window-lickingly moronic, it beggars belief. It truly shows, at least to me, that Florida's lawmakers are only interested in paying our rights lip service, or if they are in favor of our rights, are truly the most spineless, softest cocks in Florida town. The only way, in my opinion, the legislature can show respect for our rights is through deregulation flat out. This bill is not bold, it is pathetic. Now, it is good that permitless carry would be a thing at all, absolutely, but this bill is devoid of even a scintilla of the animated, lively spirit of Florida man, and for that, I think it is shameful. With that, thank you so much for watching to the end. If you like this content and want to support it, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to do more than that, I'm on Utreon, Patreon, and Subscribestar, and I have affiliate links down below. Absolutely everything you guys do helps. Until next time, y'all take care.